Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Spotlight on CS Ops. Of course, I'm here with my co-host, Jean Laurent.
Hey, Matthew.
I'm really working on my French here to get that down. I think we still have some ground to cover. And
51st
our guest
episode. You
today,
almost got it.
almost. Okay. Yeah, I'll go like medium grade right there. Yeah. And our guest today, Irwin
Yeah.
Hipsman. And Irwin, I have gotten to know Irwin, and he has an illustrious past, which we'll get into, and an amazing topic that I think nearly everybody in CS and in CS Ops runs around with. So let's send it over to you, Irwin. Tell us a little about yourself and your background.
Yeah, I'm a Boston guy with all the pros and cons of what people think about Boston guys. And I've run I've been in sales. So I've done sales at companies. I've done customer success, managed teams of customer success people. And the last four positions I've been at, I've pivoted over to customer marketing. And the first two, I was your what people think of customer marketing being more like customer advocacy. And the last two, it's more the life cycle side of customer marketing. So, you tend not to have those one-to-one relationships like you do with the customer advocacy. And you start thinking about the one-to-many. How do we, scale our conversations with them? How do we keep our database clean, which is obviously we'll talk about that as well. Thinking about cross-sell, newsletters, taking some of the pressure off of customer success for them to have to feel like they have to do everything. I was at a company once that literally every CSM had their own newsletter. It's like, no, that's not the that's not the best use of your time. Let's have customer marketing do one newsletter for everybody. You can contribute, but let's do it the other way. So those are some things with customer life cycle that I've been focusing on. And then when I left Forrester last year, I decided I just didn't have it in me to do a fifth startup of a customer marketing program and decided to go on my own. So hang a shingle, being a solopreneur, it's always been a dream. My dad was a tailor and for 50 years in Boston. And so I said, damn it, if he can do it, I can be a solopreneur as well. And so when I started thinking about, well, what can I do? It's like, well, I could be a Swiss Army knife and do everything, or I can really zero in. And the one challenge that every place that I worked at has had from a customer marketing perspective has been the health of the database. It's never been good. And it takes me the first 6 months to clean it up because it's doing your job is so much harder if the data isn't good. So let me spend 6 months cleaning up the database, and now we can start launching programs. And so that was the one challenge that I had everywhere. I said that's what I want to focus on. I'm not a data guy, but I'm a customer guy, but I know that the data is the foundation.
Well, I think for our listeners, like I'm sure they can all attest that they have the cleanest data structure for contact data. I mean, I don't know, I've worked with like something like 100 different CS teams, and not a single one ever had clean contact data. So like, it's such a huge problem. I I it's exciting to see that someone's thinking about it and how do we figure this out for companies. So in terms of like your world, like how do you approach that topic? Like where do you start? I mean, it's such a big topic, and there isn't like a
Yeah.
clean place to go out there and just find contact data.
Yeah. I mean, data means a lot of things, but what I really zero in on is for that contact that, may have been in your system for 2 or 3 years. Um, do we have the right employer for them? Have they left their company? And all the clients I've worked for so far, about 20% of the contacts they give me no longer work at that company. So that's always a nice wake up call. Um, Second is, do we have their right location? I mean, legal wants to know that because they want to make sure you're complying with state regulations, Canada email privacy, GDPR, et cetera. Field marketing wants to know that because they want to be able to invite people to the events that make sense for them. And when you first met them 3 years ago, they were here and now they're there. And that's something that nobody's going to manually update. And the third is their title. When you first met them, they were a director. Now they're a VP. Nobody's updated that. When you want to do a cross-sell campaign, you generally don't cross-sell to directors, but you do cross-sell to VPs. But if you think they're still a director, how do you do that? And the fourth piece of data that we're able to, we do this by LinkedIn, and there's some tools out there to do that, but it's not perfect, and there's still some manual work. But the fourth thing that we'll provide is the actual LinkedIn URL. And one of the recommendations I have from doing this is go to your CRM team and have them add the LinkedIn LinkedIn URL is a field in the customer contact database. You shouldn't get too much pushback, and if you do, talk to me. I'll give you all the reasons why you should put it in there. But once you've got the LinkedIn URL, because that doesn't change for people, now it's much easier to keep your customer contact database up to date.
Right.
All right. So, Irwin, give us some detail. We know that the contact database is a mess. I think the only thing that people think, might be a little worse than their contact database is probably their health score. Those two, the scourge of many CS ops teams and CS teams. But give us some data. I know you've done some research on this front and you're talking to companies. Give us some hard numbers we can use.
Yeah, so everyone I talk to says, yeah, database is okay. I look at some other like RevOps Co-op did a survey, and they found that similar to what I found, which was when I asked the question, how do you rate the cleanliness, usability, health of, and trust in the customer contact database? The average score was 47%. That is a failing grade, going back to our high school days. I think there are things we can do to get it up into the 60s and 70s. It's never going to be 90%, because there's just so many variables. But 47% should be a wake-up call to anybody who thinks about this. I mean, executives will never ask their CS, the CMO is never going to go up to the CS ops person and say, "Hey, how's our database?" Because either one of three things happen. Either it's our customers, they assume it's okay. Why should I ask that question? Or they know it's a mess and cleaning it up becomes huge, or they're much higher priorities than our customer contact database. And I'm not going to open up that can of worms. And I think that when folks realize that their database, and it's always sort of on the back burner, I think when folks realize that their database needs help, the thing is to not sort of wave this, oh, the sky is falling, oh, woe is me, this database is horrible. It's like, if you're a CS ops person or a customer marketing person, if you think about the database, go in there and fix one thing. And, for example, pick your main point of contact. Let's say you've got 500 accounts. Pick your main point of contacts, maybe work with the CSMs, and let's get that group updated. And now you can go to somebody and say, look, we just cleaned up, took us 3 months, and 80% of the people had wrong data. We just cleaned up our main point of contacts. We've done some hard work. I think we've earned the right to go to CS Ops or RevOps or whoever and say, can you help us get to that next level? Here's maybe a field that we need in the CRM, or here's a larger group of people. Can we look at maybe bringing some technology in to do this? But if you just wave your hands and say the sky's falling, nobody wants to address that. And I think the key is to do a little bit of the work that you can do on your own. Some of this you can do on your own. You can go to LinkedIn and look at 500 people and get a summer intern to do it and hack away through it. But now you've got some data to share internally. It's not that, oh, Irwin said 47% of data. We now know this is what the state of our database is. And here are the implications. Here's who it affects. It affects a lot more people than you think when it comes to the health of the database.
And I imagine these things trickle down. So if you've got a terrible contact database, your engagement rate on your customer marketing campaigns, if it sucks as well, it's probably no surprise because you're emailing, bad contact records that may no longer exist at the companies that you're emailing. And so I imagine, is that kind of how you see the world as well? This stuff is the foundation that, if you don't get this right, well, everything else you put on top of it, you can't.
It's going to be that much harder. It's going to be,
yeah.
And so here's when I was a Forrester, we have about 15,000 contacts that we really thought about, wanted to communicate with. We did some segmentation, and when I first started, the average email went out to about 1,500 people, and the open rate was about 16, 17%. A little secret to our friends in content and email: you could spend a lot of time A/B testing and focusing on the subject lines and up your open rate 2 or 3%. If you clean up your database, you're going to up your open rate 10%. So the easiest way to increase your open rate is to clean up the database. So by the time I left Forrester, our average email went down to about 900 people because we did better segmentation, and open rates obviously went up to more like 26% because of that.
Talk a little about how you measure that impact. I know like open rate, and I'm sure if I walked into a marketing conference, I would be like, oh, I got an open rate. But at the same time, open rate's not revenue. Open rate's not a direct line of sight in the CS parlance, at least to, okay, I have better retention now. So how do you in the CS world frame contact cleanup and contact hygiene in terms of tangible impact that goes past, okay, my open rate might be better?
Yeah, I don't have the data right in front of me because I printed out some of it, but one of the questions we asked was, you know, having a cleaner customer contact area, what will that impact? And the number one thing was around upsell. The number two was around renewal, and the third was around cross sell. So those were the things that people felt like that would have an impact on. And I'll give you one example from a pure revenue perspective. If you identify those people who've left, so if you were to do a database cleanup, my bet is somewhere between 15 to 20% of your contacts will have left their, left the company and gone to another company. One of the questions we asked is, how many people have what we call a repeat sales by former customer contact program or an alumni program? Only 15% said yes. 23% said sort of, and I don't know what that sort of means. It's not a formal program, it's an informal program, but only 15% of people said they track and nurture, they identify and nurture those people who are no longer at the customer and have gone to another customer. Now, somebody may not have landed yet. They may have not landed at an ICP, for example. You may not sell to government, and somebody went to government. So what we found, the last program I did at Forrester was one of those, and basically, without using any technology, we found about 400 people who had no longer at their employer. 200 of those people had landed, 200 people had not landed. So you think about classic sort of waterfall math. Of that, half of those people landed at ICPs, so we're down to 100 people. The BDRs accepted 50 of them, like any other waterfall. They accept or reject. They may be too junior, so they rejected it. And then of those, within 60 days, we closed 3 of those deals. So think about that waterfall math. Now, you might argue that person would have bought anyway, and probably would have, but they probably would have waited 6 to 9 months. So here are these people out there who are very warm leads. They know your product. You don't have to prospect to them like you do a prospect. You still have to nurture them, but in a very different way. You maybe have to incentivize them. For example, if you do an annual conference, give them a free ticket to that. Whatever that is, everyone's got something they can send a client, a former client with, former contact with. And, we were able to close, it was over $100,000 in 3 deals in 60 days. And, I assume that program's continuing and they continue to do well with it. But, I'm sort of shocked that more companies don't think about those people as contacts that need to be nurtured. They're contacts that people wait for them to call. And you spend all this time marketing people who are never going to buy, and you're not marketing the people who are going to buy, and you just sit there and wait.
Who have bought, by the way, like I think you might even use the word repeat offenders. Like, okay, they actually did this once. So they just have a different word on their business card. So
I met this guy at Forrester who was an 11-time customer.
Oh, wow.
I met him at a conference. It was amazing.
Okay.
And frankly, all we ever did was wait for him. We never nurtured him, never tracked him. We say he'll call us when he's ready to buy. It's like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
There's no excuse for that.
That's like the best kind of churn. I think it's the only kind of churn I've heard in CS that we might like.
Exactly. Yeah, these are individuals, not the account. It's individuals who moved on to another company. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I to follow through on this, like I don't want to nerd out too much or to go too deep in the technical side of things, but it's a topic that's key to me, like in the databases that I'm having fun with right now. In terms of like tracking who that human is, like I think often like we end up with like 5, 6 representations in that perspective of that guy who bought 11 times. He probably has 11 contact records at that company, unfortunately. Um, but I suspect that like you're maybe, and I know like, Gainsight is doing this now. I know Salesforce has got tooling for this now where you can really get like a people record that aligns to the human, like one record to represent the actual human. And then you can just track like all the different email addresses or the different positions that that person has worked at. I assume that's like probably something that's part and parcel and sort of what you like to do as well, like just driving more human based records versus the 11 copies of the same human.
Yeah, I mean, what I focus on is that what I call that level one data. And some of it is like the eyeball stuff. Like you look at a dump it into Excel and look at it, and somebody has an email in their last name. So there's some of that cleanup that just needs to get done, or the first names and last name reverse, or doctor is the first name and Smith is the last name, and
Yeah.
so there's that level of cleanup. Then there's the employer, title, location, LinkedIn URL. That's all level one. That's where I really can help folks. The level two is more the is the what fields need to get added to the CRM. For example, we talked about LinkedIn URL, but also date last updated. If you have a title field, you want to know when there was that last updated. If it hasn't been updated for 3 years, well, maybe it's time to go and update it. If it was updated a month ago, we can leave it alone. But that's where you start needing cooperation from the RevOps team, from the CRM team, the cleanup like that you just talked about. I think that's more in the world of the RevOps team or the whoever
Mm.
owns the CRM doing that. So I don't get involved in that part of it because they've got the tools to do that with their systems. The third level is integrating with the platform itself. So when you start getting in, when you start thinking about segmentation, is when was the date they first got their username password? When was the last time they were in? So, for example, if somebody got their username password 3 years ago, has never logged in, why do we keep emailing them? Let's take them out and increase our open rates. But those are people that maybe I shouldn't even. I've got 100,000 names. You know what? These 30,000 names of somebody who's never logged into our platform, has been in the platform for over a year. I'm not going to worry about cleaning them up. Let me focus on the people who have been in there in the past 30 days and have a certain type of title. Because you know, I've had clients give me like 50,000 names. I've had clients give me 1,000 names. My general recommendation to clients is let's start with a small universe. Let's take, a
Mhm.
really important subset. Your main point of contacts at your top companies, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 names, whatever that is. Let's go and clean that up first. Let's see what the results are. Let's see, how bad is the database? How much we can really clean up because you can't clean up 100% because some people just don't want to be found. Uh, and then we can say, okay, we were able to clean up, do a pretty good job. Now let's go to that next tier. Again, let's not try to do everything at once. Let's sort of you know do one thing at a time that makes the most sense. And over the course of the year, now we've got a clean contact database. Or you can do it all at once if it's we've got the budget, let's do it now. Let's just get it all done. That's true also. But when I talk to clients initially, it's like let's do a sample run first and let's see what we get.
Yeah, makes sense.
I feel like we just gave birth to a new ICP acronym. There's the ICP, we talk about ideal customer profile, and now I feel like there's ideal contact profile as
Yeah, yes.
well. It probably needs a different acronym since that one's taken. But there's something in there about, focusing the efforts. And so speaking of efforts,
Yeah.
um, I once worked for a CTO or in a CTO's organization. He said, until we know who owns the problem, no one owns it. I'm like, okay, super smart. So who does own this? I mean, you have a CRM administrator you just referenced who might be adding fields, but they're not going to clean up the contacts. Maybe they install a plugin or some sort of app to do parts of it, but they're still not cleaning it up. Their CSM's cleaning these up. Like, who owns it? Who owns it?
Yeah, I think if you were to go to most companies and asked, you know, who cleans up the database, everyone would say it's the CSMs because they know the customers. And I had it, but I lost it. So I don't want to open up. But I literally in one of my Slack channels got a note today, someone saying I've just been tasked to figure out the roles of my of our contacts. And my response was, let's first make sure you have your titles, because that's an easier thing to clean up. Roles is a lot harder, but if you can get titles done, now you can start going to other people in the organization, say, how are we going to figure out roles? But the poor CSM who might have 20 or 30 accounts with 10 to 15 people each account isn't going to be able to update each individual in there. They will be able to update the main point of contact. And I think everyone would argue that a CSM should be, if the main point of contact is left, CSM is responsible for marking them as inactive, or they have a new title, or they may have moved. Yeah, go in there and just update it. But I don't think any CSM would say, well, then that I'll do everyone else, all the other contacts in the database. I'm going to focus on the person I meet with, once a month, on a monthly basis. So my take is that if an organization has a CS ops, and I realize that's probably the smallest of groups when you compare rev ops, marketing ops, sales ops, CS ops, it's the smallest of the groups. But if an organization has a CS ops team, that's the group that should own the health, the updating and enriching of the contact database. They understand customers and they understand operations. Rev ops understands operations, they may not understand customers. Customer marketing understands customers, they may not understand operations. So, CS to me, CS ops is the perfect place for that. If the organization doesn't have CS ops, I might start looking at customer marketing. I mean, you might not think that, because you think of customer marketing as the advocacy people, but if you have a life cycle marketer, that's another person who could start taking responsibility for it. They may not have the tools or the budgets that an operations group has, but they can at least start doing some of that experimentation. Let me look at 500 names and see what it looks like, and making that case to the organization. So those are, I think, the two spots to take ownership for it.
I like that. And then you mentioned earlier, like, using an intern to like maybe, yeah, put a project together or have someone pull some things together. I'm curious, like we talk a lot about AI on this show and, new tech. Are you seeing anything like in the AI space that can help this, help match
Yeah,
data, help clean data?
the data processing world is out of control. And the LinkedIn scraping world is out of control. I mean, there are SOC 2 providers and there are non-SOC 2 providers. That's one easy way to differentiate in the universe. There are tools that you've got to be a developer to use. There are tools that are really simple to use. I'm starting to see two things happen in the space when it comes to this update and enrichment. One is that there are companies that you have to sign an annual license with and a contract, and they'll do a lot for you, and they've integrated AI into it, so they can find the people, certainly a lot quicker and a lot cheaper than manually doing it. And then there are some tools out there that are starting to use AI, like a Clay, to do that. The problem with Clay is that it's pretty expensive, and you have to sign a 1 year contract, and that for some companies is great, for some other companies isn't. It'll take a year to procure a tool like that, because they're touching your customer contact database. If I was legal, there'd be a lot of questions about that. The benefit, little promo, the benefit of working with me is that the data process I work with will do a one-off for me. So let's take your list, 2010, whatever it is, do the update and enrichment, and then you can decide, what you want to do from there. Do you want to do the rest of your list, or how do you want to go? So you don't have to get into this major procurement cycle, which is even harder in 2025 than it was in 2024. Let's get this done, and see what the results are, and then decide what the best way to go forward. But those tools, the data processors, are starting to use AI to find the people, to set up rules like, okay, this becomes a lead in Salesforce, automatically, things like that. So it is getting better, but there's still the manual work that needs to be done. I estimate that if I sent 10,000 names to data processor, they'll find about 9,000 of them. And then I can probably find another 500 of them by doing some manual work, because you get maiden names, you get very common names. You get people who, that says their new company is they're the board of directors of their communities nonprofit. There's still work at Dynatrace, but they have this new role. So somebody needs to eyeball that and say, no, 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 that's not their job. They need to, their job is what is, what they had. So there's still some work that needs to be done manually. And you could probably get up to finding 95% of the people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Don't mark that guy inactive just yet. That Dynatrace guy. Erwin, as we start to wrap up,
Yeah,
tell us, give us a success. You've given us a couple, but I'm kind of inspired by it because I think with the advent of digital, and it's not just an advent anymore, it's sort of the table stakes, digital CS, and you're hearing the pooled CS movement and the we're not going to name a CSM for you movement. What are some of the things that companies could do
sure.
were they to not solve fully this thing, but move the needle from, becoming one of those who was unhappy to, 60 or 70% clean.
Yeah, I mean, when I looked at the high performers, when I asked those questions, for example, how often do you update and enrich your database? Do you have a cross communication, a cross-functional group that meets on a regular basis to talk about customer communications? The higher performers scored about 62%, and the lower performers scored about 34%. The average was around 47%. So I believe by doing some of the things that we'll be talking about in this report, you can improve by 15% your score and get to a passing grade. 62% to me is a passing grade. And I think some of the steps I would recommend. Step one is do an inventory of all of your customer communications. I was shocked. I did that at Forrester. It took me a long time because there were communications that nobody even knew about, but they knew went out, but nobody know even like who owns it, what's the open rate, how does it even get out, what tools do we use? Because they're all automated, particularly those automated communications, because a lot of them were written 3 years ago. And so the tone of voice isn't right, the branding's not right. It sounds like an engineer wrote it. So what in a basic inventory, what are all the emails that we send out in a one-to-many fashion, not the one-to-ones? Who's responsible? What tool gets sent out? Sometimes it goes out through the through the application itself, sometimes through Salesforce, sometimes through an email, Marketo, whatever it might be. What are the open rates? Just so you have that inventory. And I think everyone will be shocked when they see it all in one place. They'll say, well, let's start combining things or let's start cleaning things up. So that's one thing that could be done. And that's you don't need a lot of cooperation to do that. It's like asking people like what goes out the door to customers and looking at it to make sure it makes sense, show it to the branding people. Then from a CS ops perspective, I'd spend some time with customer, they probably spend time with RevOps already. They don't, obviously should. I'd spend some time with the customer marketing side of the house, particularly if there's a life cycle marketer, really get to know them. To understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And then the third thing is I would just I wouldn't wait for the summer intern. I would take a random sample of about 500 customer contacts, and either one person spends 20, 30 hours on it, or divvy it up amongst everyone. Take 50 of these names, go into LinkedIn, and just see how good is that sample from. Do they still work at the company? Do we have the right title? And do we have the right location? Just the basics. And that will tell you a lot. And that will provide some direction as to where we should go next.
I love it. You've given us some like really practical tips on trying to fix a big problem. There's like, this often can sound like a Mount Everest for companies. And I love that you've broken it down into like very kind of palatable pieces that, you can start with. So appreciate you coming in today and walking us through that. I do have one last question
Sure.
that maybe isn't related to contact data, but I see in the back there you have a game ball. So or a basketball, I should say. Maybe it's a game ball. I don't know. But tell us a little bit about your what do you do for fun outside? You clearly like basketball.
Yeah, well, before COVID, I played, every twice a week up until COVID, and then the gyms closed, and we never got back together again. One little, my son-in-law's dad used to be the ball boy for the Milwaukee Braves, and so he has a Henry Aaron bat. He was also the trainer for the Milwaukee Bucks. He has a Lou Alcindor. jacket,
Awesome.
before he changed to Kareem. And he said that, I hate to tell you, it's mainly the ball boys who are doing the signing. Most of the time, the athletes themselves are not signing. He said, I got really good at like Henry Aaron, but to be honest, he probably didn't sign most of the things that we gave out. So I've got a ball from probably about 15, 20 years ago, Celtics, and big fan of them, big fan of the NBA. And and
So that's an
I've
actual.
got three granddaughters, which two are in Wisconsin, so they're Bucks fans, and one in Boston. She's a Celtic fan, and they keep me very busy, and we get to see them a lot, which is really the true joy of my life. Which is why I think I've become a solopreneur rather than work for a company again. As I want to have some time to spend with the kids.
Yeah, love it. Absolutely love it. Great to hear. Then and hopefully the Celtics do well this year. Obviously, you had a pretty big year last year, so
Yeah, I know, and thank the two of you. And this is it's a labor of love, and it's a lot of people out there doing podcasts and things like that. And when I saw what you guys were doing, I said that's a group I want to be talking to.
Well, you're in the crowd now, Irwin. So thank you for
yeah,
joining us. Thanks for joining the guests that have come before you and adding to you the story here. We've had a
Yeah,
great
and
time.
people can find me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way.
All right. And it
awesome.
sounds like you've got some stuff coming up as far as more data and more from your research. So go find
Yep,
Irwin on LinkedIn and follow his story.
yep. It'll be out in April.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you all next time.